She was only 8 years old, poor, quiet, and invisible to most. Yet on that day, inside a room filled with power, wealth, and judgment, her tiny voice cut through the silence. Everyone had turned their backs on him, the young millionaire, accused of a crime he didn't commit. Even his lawyer had walked away. But then the least expected person stood up. A little black girl, dressed in torn clothes, spoke 3 words that stopped every heartbeat in the room. He's not guilty. Why did she defend him? And what happened next would shock everyone. The young millionaire had everything most could only dream of: wealth, luxury, and a future that seemed untouchable. His name carried weight in business circles. His face appeared in glossy magazines, and people whispered about his success wherever he went. But beneath the glamour, he was still human. A man trying to live up to the expectations that came with his family's empire. That day should have been routine, a quick meeting, a legal formality, yet somehow, accusations spread like wildfire. A single claim without proof, and suddenly he was dragged into a courtroom, stripped of his dignity, and painted as guilty before he could even speak. The air inside the courthouse was heavy, filled with murmurs and cold stares. On one side sat men in sharp suits, on the other faces eager to see the mighty fall. He looked for support, for the lawyer he trusted. But when the moment came, that lawyer shook his head, closed his briefcase, and abandoned him without warning. For the first time in his life, the young millionaire felt powerless. Alone, surrounded by eyes that judged him, he realized that money couldn't buy loyalty, nor could it protect him from the sting of injustice. And just as the silence of betrayal weighed on him, a voice would rise, not from power, not from wealth, but from a child who had nothing to lose and everything to give. The judge's gavel struck, echoing through the courtroom like a warning bell. Whispers rippled across the room, each one questioning, doubting, and condemning. The young millionaire sat frozen, his mind racing. He had been raised to believe money could solve everything: lawyers, connections, influence. But now, all of it was slipping away. The lawyer's chair sat empty, his so-called defender gone. Every glance toward him carried the same weight: guilty until proven innocent. And then there she was, a small figure near the back of the room, barely noticed by anyone. A little black girl, no more than 8 years old, dressed in a faded dress with shoes too big for her feet. Her hair was braided neatly, though her clothes told the story of struggle. She had no family sitting beside her, no authority to speak, but her eyes never left him. As the accusations piled on, she stepped forward. Her footsteps were light, almost hesitant, but her presence began to draw attention. The court clerk frowned, and the guards shifted uneasily. Why was this child walking forward? The millionaire, broken and stunned, barely registered her until she stood only a few steps away. "Stop this," someone barked from the back, but she didn't flinch. With trembling hands, she pointed at him. He didn't do it. Gasps filled the courtroom. Laughter followed too. Mocking. Cruel. What could a poor child know? But she didn't back down. Her small voice, though shaky, carried a conviction that not even the grown men in suits could muster. She spoke of how she had seen the truth with her own eyes, how the story told against him didn't match what she had witnessed outside that very building. The room erupted, some dismissing her, words others whispering in confusion, and yet, in that moment, she planted a seed of doubt. Suddenly, the story wasn't as clear, and the accusations weren't as solid. The powerful were unsettled, the crowd divided. A child no one expected had cracked the foundation of lies, and, for the first time that day, the young millionaire lifted his head, hope flickering in his eyes. But this was only the beginning, because the more she spoke, the more the world inside that courtroom began to shift, and not everyone was ready to let the truth surface. The courtroom boiled with noise, shouts, objections, laughter, and disbelief. The judge pounded the gavel, again and again, demanding order. But the little girl's words lingered in the air like thunder that refused to fade. The prosecutor sneered, leaning over his desk. "This child is no witness," he scoffed. She has nothing to offer. His voice dripped with arrogance as if dismissing her existence would erase her truth. But she didn't move. Her small frame shook, yet her eyes blazed with a strength far beyond her years. She repeated the words louder this time. He's not guilty. The room went silent. Not because they believed her, but because no one dared interrupt the courage spilling from a child who had nothing. The young millionaire felt a lump in his throat. He had been betrayed by adults who promised loyalty and abandoned by the very system his wealth had built trust in. And here stood a child, poor, black, overlooked by society, defending him when no one else dared. Then came the breaking point. A guard tried to escort her out, but she clung to the railing with tiny hands, tears streaking her face. I saw. What happened? She cried. It wasn't him. You're punishing the wrong man. Gasps swept the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. The judge hesitated, caught between dismissing her and acknowledging that her words had cracked the perfect case laid before him. For the first time, the scales of power wavered, not because of money, not because of authority, but because of the truth shouted by a child no one expected to matter. The millionaire's chest tightened. He realized this was more than his trial. It was hers too. A test of whether the truth, spoken by the most powerless among them, could stand against a world built to silence voices like hers. The gavel struck again, harder this time. Order in the court. But nothing could erase what had just been spoken. The room, the case, the future. It had all changed in that single moment. When the gavel finally struck for the last time, the air in the courtroom was different. What began as a one-sided battle had been shaken by a voice no one expected. The young millionaire, once abandoned and humiliated, now stood taller, not because he had won yet, but because someone had reminded him that truth still had power. The little black girl was escorted out not with chains or punishment, but with eyes following her every step. Some looked at her with pity, others with disbelief, but a few looked at her with something rare, respect. She had walked into a place where money ruled and showed them that courage was priceless. For the millionaire, her defense cut deeper than any lawyer's argument ever could. It wasn't just about being declared innocent anymore, it was about realizing how fragile justice could be when left in the hands of those who valued wealth over truth. And for those who watched, the impact was undeniable. A child, overlooked and powerless, had forced the world to pause. She had reminded them that voices often silenced could still echo loud enough to shake the walls of power. He left the courthouse a changed man, not just because he had been defended, but because he had been saved by someone society tried to forget. Her words would haunt him, guide him, and remind him that justice doesn't always come from those in robes or suits. It sometimes comes from the most unexpected hearts. So ask yourself, in a world where power and money so often drown out truth, who will have the courage to stand up next time and say the words everyone else is too afraid to speak?